All right. Thank you all for watching Competing in Cornfields. Clint Baldwin here with Grant Allen in the house. And Grant, do you have any sponsors or places, events, people you like to shout out, things in general?
So if you can go to my website, which is livefin.com, lyvfin.com. That's where you can kind of get a whole idea of particularly what I do. I'm in the finance world, and so that's really where you can find me. You can find all my information on there as well if you go to our team. And yeah, that's pretty much me as far as events go. If you are a UNK student, I'll be talking to you here in a few weeks. So looking forward to that. But other than that, yeah, not any events. I pretty much do everything virtually. So this whole COVID thing hasn't really been anything different for me. So
All right. Well, when are you at UNK? Or what is that about?
So UNK is doing a virtual event, which I think is really cool. They're doing it's like Adulting 101, and it's just going to be like a week-long course. I'm still unsure how many students are going to be a part of it. It might be the whole freaking school. It might just be 10 people. I could really care less. But the cool thing about it is they're going to be basically promoting adulting things like buying your first home, what credit really is, all the way down to changing the oil in your car, when you should change the oil in your car. And usually it's when the check engine light comes on, but nonetheless.
Or when you're supposed to.
Yeah, or when you're supposed to.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, yeah, it's just going to be a really cool, basically I think it's a 2 or 3 day long event. I could be wrong. But really excited. I'm going to be talking on the personal branding side of things. So when you are promoting yourself, specifically yourself as a business, how you should go about that, things that you should consider, and kind of being a young entrepreneur as a whole, which is really basically the only way I know how to make money now. That's kind of how I started, and so yeah, I'm really excited about that event in particular. I'm a Bearcat, so it's a little bit of a conflict of interest with UNK, but whatever, we'll get through it. And it's going to be fun to talk to college kids for sure, and hopefully influence them in one way, shape, or form. So
definitely. Do you think that there's anything or do you think that your education and experience helped you like in your adulthood, or can you see where there are obvious things where that helped you, like specifically your education, I guess?
Yeah, so man, it's an interesting question because honestly, yes and no. I would say that colleges today are really just kind of their own business. And it's not something that you really recognize or understand as an 18-year-old kid. It's just kind of what you are told that you have to do to go through. And there's certainly jobs that require college. Like, I'm not saying that colleges are useless. But I think from the aspect of, I'm a huge believer in career capital. And what I mean by career capital is all of the experiences that you have over the course of your life provides you a lot of capital, right? Like if you were to go work a job, you're going to get paid by the hour or paid for, what your service or product is worth or whatever the case may be. And career capital is kind of the experience side of things where whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're going through is teaching you something, and it's going to be valuable for you in some way, shape, or form throughout the rest of your life. And so I would say, I never say that I regret going to college. It's why we know each other. It's why my best friends are my best friends now. But as a whole, like, I would say yes, that it does help me in the sense that it's like there's very basic laws and understandings of life in general. And I think I learned a lot of that in college. Like, I grew up in a really small town, not diverse at all, which is no surprise in the middle of Nebraska, right? Like, literally in the middle of Cornfields, so it's very on brand with the podcast.
Competing in Cornfields.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that, coming from a place that is predominantly, like, just white farmers, and going to a school, going to college, being in a bigger quote-unquote city such as Lincoln, which is like, however many times bigger than the 250 people in my hometown.
300,000.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Right.
it's still a small town in the grand scheme of things of Lincoln, but you meet so many different perspectives, and I think that that's like another part of that career capital that you can add to kind of your experience bank in a sense of you get to learn a lot of different things from the experiences that you have. And so I'm most grateful for college for the experiences. And I'm also really grateful having played sports. That's why we know each other. I'm sure we would have met each other regardless being at Wesleyan.
For
but
sure.
but
Partying.
yeah. But yeah, I think with football specifically for me, like, I wasn't a standout at all, and I used to shy away from even talking about that, because it did really hurt for the longest time that I wasn't like really at all a contributor to the team, and that used to really bother me, and it used to be something that I used to think of, like, damn, like, if I could have just like played a little bit more, like, I feel like I would have a little bit more credibility, or like when we get back together with the guys, I'd have more to talk about. But at the end of the day, like, the best thing that ever happened to me, because when you get to the college level, and you know this,
Yeah.
like, when you get to the college level, you know that everybody comes from being the best at where they're coming from.
They were
right?
all the best players on their team.
Right. And, like, that was the same case with me. And, honestly, man, like, the best thing that ever happened to me was being a backup for my entire career. And I say that because, I learned so much of just, like, because there's multiple times where I wanted to quit. And I wanted to stop, and I didn't want to play anymore. And I was just like, dude, this is just a waste of time. Like, I could go to UNL, or I could go somewhere else, finish out my degree, party, have a good time. And I'm so glad I didn't, because everything that I learned about, like, perseverance and discipline and, finishing what you started from sucking and not getting, the time that I thought I deserved. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't deserve it. Obviously, I didn't deserve it. I didn't get it, so I didn't deserve it. And it's one of those things where it's just like, dude, just keep going and just finish the job. And so, yeah, to kind of bring that all together, like, college was really beneficial to me in the sense that I learned so much more about discipline, specifically from the football side, like discipline, finishing the job, sticking with it. And to be totally honest, like, I wasn't really like a knockout student either. Like, I was
not either.
Yeah. I was
not good at school.
Yeah. I was a very average student until I got to my master's degree, and then I was like, hey, I want to try this and just see what happens, and I graduate with honors. So it's like, all right, cool. Like, if I would have just tried a little bit harder, I might have saved some dollars. But that's stuff that you just learn. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you're stupid or that you don't understand. It's just like you just didn't know it at the time. And so I think the biggest aspect of the college side of things was it provided me a lot of career capital.
Oh yeah.
And
100%.
And just gave me the experiences that I wanted, and there's a lot of experiences we could talk about right now that we're not going to talk about.
We're not going to talk about it.
And it's just, all of that aside, like, it taught me everything. And it's where you become a man. It's where you become an adult. It's where you have to, make decisions for yourself, and you have to weigh the options of whether or not it's a good or bad decision. And so, but that all comes from, again, places of just being uncomfortable and not knowing what the next move is, and being scared and being nervous and sad and, happy, and all of those things involved. And so it all comes back to that career capital concept of, you learn from everything that you do. It's just how you decide to apply it later on.
Yeah, no kidding. And I feel like whenever I'm like you, like I didn't play a ton, but I played, my decent share, and I had fun, and it was great. And but whenever somebody does maybe dig up that, like, oh, you played at Nebraska Wesleyan, I'm like, yeah. Like, was it all 4 years?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? They come in,
yeah.
And now I just think about all the situations that I would have been in where, like, if I didn't play all 4 years, if I would have just tried to be a bodybuilder, I had thoughts of at one point when, that would have hurt. But one thing that I think about is nobody's above anybody, obviously, but for the most part, I've saw that like there's professionally there's some things that I'll spot like a mile away, being like, nope, not right, not right. I know that like Dr. Watley or Dr. Sparrow or any of them would have been all over me about. Like I see people. I feel like I'm playing checkers and they're playing tic tac toe, and then there are people with master's degrees like you and people like way smarter than me, obviously, who are probably even playing chess above me. You know what I mean? But we still learn from all those experiences, and I mean it definitely helps. Yeah. For sure helps. Like yeah, in every facet, like sports too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean at the end of the day too, like education, like the letters behind your name really don't mean shit.
Right.
Unless you're willing to apply them in a way that is beneficial to your life and others' lives too. But yeah, like if anybody knows me, like it's funny. I actually talked to a teacher of mine because I told you I'm writing a book, and a teacher of mine when I was like in middle school, and then he ended up leaving. We talked last week. It was like our first time talking, and it was kind of funny because we just hadn't talked in that duration of time. And he was like, "You went and got a master's, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And he was like, "Really?" Mm-hmm. It's like fascinating.
Right.
Like, yeah, no, I get it. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? So, like, it doesn't always necessarily mean that you're smarter or better or anything. It's just whether or not you're willing to expose yourself to being uncomfortable. Because to be totally honest, like my first semester of my master's degree, I was on academic probation because I was so bad in my undergrad. And so not like I wasn't horrible, like I was a 2.95 or 2.98, which is almost a 3.0, so it's like whatever, but C's get degrees, right? And so
right. I think that
except master's degrees.
Right.
So once I got to that point, I was like, oh crap, like I actually have to like try and legitimately care. And it helped that I was in something at the time that I was really interested in. So it all seemed fairly simple and easy, but yeah, it's just a matter of what you learn, and if you apply it in a positive way, like it can be beneficial for you. So
for sure. And so I believe that you studied strength and conditioning and also nutrition. Mm-hmm. Does that help you in your day to day nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, like that was probably one of those things that is just like a generally good thing to know. Like you can really get all of that information on social media now, and for the most part, whether or not all of it's correct is another story, right? But I think what helps me is that I know which is bullshit and which isn't.
You can find your sources.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of great people to follow, and there's a lot of people that I trust that I know are coming from a science-based position, and so for me, like, it helped me sift through that a lot of the times, because like most people just really are probably pitching you a product in most cases, or whatever they believe in,
or what worked for them. Or they're not like branching it off like
they're coming from a more of a relative position than like a completely 100% non-biased position. And so
right,
at the end of the day, like, it definitely helped me in that sense, and I still enjoy working out, and I still enjoy like eating fairly healthy. I would say I could be much better in all facets, but that's just kind of as is life. Like you can always be better in every facet.
Especially like I'm done using the excuse because of COVID.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think that everybody's like main thing that they were like doing during COVID, or at least mine, would be like, like, I don't know. What are we going to eat tonight? Oh, everything?
Yeah.
Like, like, okay, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Like, nothing else to do. We're not going out or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and so, I would say that's been the most beneficial but, and I like continue to come back to it, but it's just like that career capital, right? Like, it's still valuable to me in the sense that it's like, I know how I should eat. I know what I shouldn't eat, and I know that I should be working out regularly, and I know that, sometimes you need rest, and sometimes you need to go all out, and sometimes you need to, kind of toe the line. And so, yeah, it's been valuable as a whole, but I'm not necessarily like applying it from a coaching perspective anymore. But I think that there's like kind of a freedom in that too, where I don't feel as pressured to be 100% on top of it constantly. I can allow myself to relax sometimes. And like last week was one of them. One of the reasons I got out of the strength conditioning field was because I felt myself not wanting to train, and I felt myself like hating small aspects of it. Like I hated the smell of the weight room. I hated like small things that I needed to do with the weight room. And it wasn't necessarily that I didn't want to see the people that, like the athletes that I was training. It had nothing to do with them. It had nothing to do with anything else. There was just like small things that I was just like, man, like, I don't know if it was just God like tapping me on the shoulder and being like, hey, like, if this is what you want to do, then cool, we'll roll with it. But I'm just telling you that you probably don't want to do this. And so, yeah, I think, there's certainly applications in my everyday life that I use it, but not as much anymore as I used to, obviously, when it was like the main objective for what I wanted to do. So, but it's still valuable.
Oh, for sure. Do you still try and keep up on like the new stuff that's coming out, or like the new nutrition, new strength and conditioning? The nutrition seems to change all the time, but there are some tried and true things that work.
Right. Yeah, when it comes to training specifically, I would say training specifically really has not changed. Ever so often there's somebody that comes in with a new exercise or a new way of training or a new whatever, and I just kind of be like, go prove it. You know what I mean? Like, go prove it, go show that it works, and maybe it works for the specific sport that you're going into. But there's so many different aspects, and I think actually that's one of the things that I learned as a coach early on was really athletes need to know how to move. They need to know how to run. They need to know how to get faster. And that's about it. Like, if you can apply that and you can help them get a little bit stronger too, like, they're probably going to be pretty damn good athletes. And they need to know, like, how to balance and mobility and all those types of things too, like, which is super important. Yeah. But when I made things like super, super basic and super, super easy, not only was it better for the athlete, it was better for me from a programming standpoint. They got better as athletes because we weren't training for a totally different thing. We were training to just be stronger as an athlete. Like, because the big misconception in strength conditioning, in my opinion, and again, I'm out of the field, so my opinion might be totally invalid, but I think every athlete should be trained in basically how to just be an athlete. And then from there, like, let their coaches in their sport teach them the skill and help them, like, refine their skill, make them a better overall athlete and make them a stronger, more durable athlete, and they'll be better as a whole. And so, yeah, when new things come out, it's like, all right, usually it's not necessarily like a new training method, it's usually just like a new, like, piece of equipment. Like, the other day I saw a picture of Justin Thomas, and he had like it was like kind of like a slosh pipe type of concept, but it was like maybe this long. It almost looked like, those like sandbags with the handles. It was like that, but it was a slosh pipe.
It was a pipe that had like beans in it or something?
No,
it
had like water. Yeah, it had like water. So it was like probably this round and maybe this long, and it had like handles right here, and it had water, and he's doing like lunges with it. And it's like, okay, like that's
the same thing as the bag. Or the water bags, straight up water bags.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's always going to be, but that's kind of the beauty of living in America, is it's a capitalist society, and so you can make money however you see fit as long as it's legal. And so, in some cases, if it isn't, you know what I mean? And so, like, again, I don't have any hate towards like people that come out with products. It's just like for me, it's just not something that I would buy into personally.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, it's a marketing ploy for a lot of trainers, unfortunately, and having like weird looking things or some type of device that can seem out of the norm, and then you put Derrick Henry on it, and it's like, well, that's how I should train.
Oh,
it's like,
yeah,
well,
Tractor Ceto.
No, not
Yeah,
not necessarily.
yeah.
You know, so. Training method wise, though, I think people should squat heavy. I think people should overhead press and not bench. That's probably the most controversial thing that I have. I think there's maybe like a small population of like athletes as a whole that should even bench.
What about like a bamboo bar or something like that?
Yeah, maybe it could be implemented.
Like some kettlebells, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure. I think that comes back to like a stability, mobility type of training session rather than like a, hey, we're trying to like get as much weight as we possibly can. Like, if it's meant to make you a better athlete, then great, let's do it. But again, like, I'm not in that field anymore, so it's hard for me to sit here and throw stones and be like, yeah, this is great or this is bad. Like, I'm kind of whatever about it. Like, as long as there's barbells involved and jumping and running, I'm pretty cool with it. And a pull-up bar. That's basically, I feel like, all you really need.
Pulls.
So...
Yeah, and that's interesting, and like I think that like every strength coach is kind of different with that. Like whenever I was training at Kratos Strength and Performance with Cody Anthony, we never like just did flat bench. We did the bamboo or crazy bar, whichever one. I don't know what it's actually called. I think it's called the bamboo bar because that's what it looks like, and they like put kettlebells with things on the side, or maybe we did like some incline dumbbell, maybe.
Yeah.
But maybe even we did it with kettlebells, and I was talking to another maybe a powerlifting centered coach, Desi Cooney, on an earlier podcast, and he's like, yeah, nothing wrong with benching. And then I have another friend who's a strength coach who, Stuart Hart, hopefully he's going to be on here soon, and he was saying that he was actually injured by doing straight bar bench, like, so maybe would you have your athletes do that? I'd be interesting to hear from that, and maybe you don't believe so, but then some people do, and I don't know.
I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. I just think it's
with
more...
flat bench with a straight bar.
Yeah, flat bench with a straight bar, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, even when I worked with TCU, like, they had all their quarterbacks or pitchers, they still had them bench, but it was like a dumbbell bench or like a neutral barbell, like a quarterback bar. Yeah. A lot of people call it, or like a Nerf bar.
Well, people do curls with those and stuff too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you can do, You
can do a lot of stuff with those barbells, and they're fun. Like, I really like them for close grip bench because then you're in a neutral position. If you're like, you can go pretty narrow too with them. But honestly, man, like, I have no problem with bench. I just don't necessarily, like, not necessarily I don't believe it. I just, like, think that you could probably get the same stimulus from like doing it really fast rather than maxing it out, right?
Yeah.
And then additionally, I've always had an issue with like, hey, we're okay with these athletes doing it, but these athletes aren't okay with doing it. It's like, well, then clearly there's some shit wrong with it. You know what I mean? Like, right. Clearly there's some, like, even you have doubts in it of like they shouldn't be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, from my perspective, like, if you're doing it correctly, then great. But if you're feeling like it has to be involved in your programming, cool. For me personally, I just never put a high premium on it because in most cases, there's only like a few different people. There's only a few different movements in sport where you're like having to have maximum effort into a horizontal push, and that's usually like linemen, linebackers, and wrestling. Maybe that's really about it. Say so. Yeah, and so I've just never put.
But even so, like even like with the clean.
Oh yeah.
I mean that might even be more beneficial.
Yeah. You'll get a mixed review from every single coach that you ever talk to about cleans.
Yeah.
Like from my perspective, when it comes to anything Olympic, and specifically like I was working from the college realm too. So whenever I'm looking at a college athlete, whenever I'm working with them, it was always, this is the limited amount that we have together anyway. It would be far more beneficial for them and for the coaching side of things and the session as a whole for me to just have them throw a med ball as high as they possibly can at 15 pounds than having to teach them the absolute specifics of Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's one of those, like, it's a time thing. You know, it was never anything that I, like, hated cleans or didn't want people to do cleans.
What about hang cleans versus the actual straight
like
from the
clean?
ground?
Yeah.
Hang cleans might be a little bit better for athletes.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know. I don't necessarily know how I feel about that, because I think you could get just as much benefit from 40% of what somebody's power clean is than, 85% of somebody's hang clean. And
Okay.
I mean that because, like, again, if you can, and it comes back to the philosophy and the system of, like, making an athlete faster, stronger, and more explosive. I'm sure I'm missing a few, more agile, more, whatever.
Yeah,
like you can
all around.
Yeah, basically, like, I think time would be far more spent teaching them how to move correctly and teaching them, like, the super basics of, like, hey, this is how you jump, this is how you land. Like, landing training is super important.
Even off of box jumps or anything.
Yeah. So we did a ton of depth jumps that were super boring. Like, I know, if any of my tennis kids from Northwest listen to this, they're gonna be like, oh my god.
You're training the tennis kids,
yeah.
too. Yeah,
Yeah, so
tennis athletes.
Well, and on the flip side of that too, like, as a strength coach, I was training kids that had never stepped foot in a weight room. We had kids from Brazil, we had kids from Spain, and it's not that they don't lift over there, it's just maybe that they haven't, like, been exposed to it. Mm-hmm. And so, like, their idea of getting better at their sport is playing it more volume of their sport, which is also, you could talk about that for hours, right?
That's what a lot of people think about MMA too.
Yeah, and so, like, a lot of people feel that way about, like, super specific sports, like golf, MMA, tennis, where like, things are really specific movements, and really minute, detailed sports. Assume that they don't need strength training; they just need to do more of their sport. And I don't necessarily believe that that's totally the case. Like, I think that there's, like, especially in someone's early career, like, there's a base of where you're at, right? And if we can enhance that base even a little bit, make you less prone to injury, make sure that you have the conditioning that you need. Like, if you're in good condition outside of your sport, and then you come into your sport and you're just adding on top of that from the experience of the sport, like, you can run all the sprints that you want to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can go 5 minutes in a cage, right? On the flip side of that, you could go 5 minutes a cage, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can run or sprint forever either. And so, 100%. It's one of those topics where there's so much. I would say, like, the biggest issue with the strength conditioning field is that everybody assumes that they have the golden fucking ticket to everything that they do, and that they have it right. And the truth is like, I think if people were to get far more simple in their approach, I think everybody would benefit from, not only from a programming perspective, but from also, like, the person that you're training or the athlete that is benefiting from it will benefit more from it psychologically and physically, because it's just, you don't have to think about it, you just go do it.
Right.
It becomes natural for you, and then that'll transfer to your sport, and from there you'll be better at your sport. And so, because that's the end goal, right? Like, we want them to be better at their sport. We don't want them to necessarily be powerlifters or bodybuilders or whatever. Like, that's a totally different sport, It requires different training. So, yeah, it's a super deep topic, and that's why they continue to have really pointless conventions where, somebody comes in and talks about how they train because everybody wants to know how Alabama trained their football players. It's like, well,
first off, they got all the best. First off, they got all the best football players there. Yeah. Then they trained them. You know what I mean? It's not like.
Well, and I think Coach Cochran does a really good job.
He's a strength coach for Alabama.
Yeah, and I've talked with him a number of times, and the cool thing about him is that he, like, admits to that. He's very much like, hey, like, I'm just, like, here. He, like, Saban goes out and recruits Bentleys. He's like, when they come into here, like, all my job is to do is to just tint the windows, and put the spinners on it. You know, he's like, that's all I have to do.
Yeah.
You know, so and if you look at his programming, it's really, really simple. You know, it's really, really simple stuff. You know, it's basic barbell stuff. It's pull-ups, a shitload of pull-ups and a shitload of pulls, and you know, protecting the back side of your body to make sure that the front side of your body's good. You know what I mean? And a ton of.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so, you know, I've seen a lot of different aspects of this. From like TCU was really, really heavy into back training, like almost to a fault.
Are you talking about back?
Yeah, like the back, the posterior,
low back.
Yeah, everything. And so, obviously, like, those are going to be your prime movers for explosiveness, whether it be your hamstrings, glutes, explosiveness from your traps, back, delts, whatever, low back, all those good things. All of your power is coming from there. And so, when you have a really strong backside of your body, like, if you look at all the best athletes, they have huge asses, right? And it's usually because they have super powerful lower bodies. And so, whether or not that's, like, an absolute rule is another thing, but
genetic maybe.
Yeah, it could be genetic too. It's probably mostly genetic, but basically the synopsis of it is like have a strong posterior chain and you'll have a very well-rounded athlete for the most part, because all of their power is coming from that, because whenever you're loading to do anything explosive, it's coming from an eccentric position, and all of the eccentric muscles are being activated in any type of explosive movement, aka your hamstrings, glutes, and your back. And so, yeah, I think from a training perspective, you know, if you want to be explosive, if you want to be strong, if you want to be a better athlete, like, train the heck out of your posterior chain and run a lot and jump a lot. Like,
and
that,
core as well?
Yeah, core as well. You know, like, obviously you want to have a strong core. It's the base of your body, really, or it's the connector of your body, I should say, rather than the base of your body, right? Like, the base of our body is our legs. But yeah, I mean, training your core, you know, having a strong posterior chain, and then running and jumping, like, that's really as simple as you can make it. And truly, I think that's how the best athletes do it. You know, you look at some of the best athletes in the world, and like, they had no prior training experience. Like, watch The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. He didn't even start lifting weights until like his 8th year in the league.
Right.
And so,
yeah,
you know, if that tells you anything, and then they started winning championships. So,
yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, would you put an extra emphasis on the core? You know what?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I don't know. People say like that. Yeah, I train my upper body and my lower body. You know what I mean? And then maybe they get their back messed up, and they're saying like, yeah, it's because you didn't work your core enough.
Right.
That's a real thing?
Yeah, I think it's a real thing. Again, I've been out of the field for so long that I almost feel like an imposter.
I got you.
Talking about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like sense. I shouldn't even say for so long. It's been, you know, like a little bit of almost 3 years now.
Oh, 3 years.
It's been about 3 years now. And so, you know, for me to come in and be like, man, this is what you should do, is I don't know if it's just like a strength coach code, but it's like, I wouldn't listen to a dude that's been out of it and then came back, you know.
Well, we all have our opinions. I mean, I could talk on things, and all I know is through training and through what other people have told me, and then stuff I've found on my own. Yeah. But like you're saying, like the running and jumping and sled pushes. Yeah. You know, just real life stuff. Using the med balls, kettlebells. Yeah. You know, that's a little bit more realistic than your dumbbells, right? Barbells in some spots. Yeah.
No, and I think a lot of it comes just from application, right? Like if you squat correctly, like your core is going to get stronger. If you if you're doing rotational med ball throws, like your core is going to get stronger. If you're doing overhead throws, your core is going to get stronger. Mm-hmm. You know, teaching people how to breathe, teaching people how to brace.
Belly breathing,
everything, like whatever, you know, whatever you can do to make your core stronger in some way, shape, or form without like absolutely taxing it. Like, core doesn't mean working your abs. Core means like moving as a unit, in my opinion. And so, and that's just my opinion, but I have to pee really bad. Can I use the restroom?
Yeah, for sure.
It'll be like.
All right, so like definitely tell me if I'm wrong, but like at least after we had graduated, I've got like an entrepreneurial vibe from you, and all like I've seen Monks is doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And all that. Can you tell us maybe some of the benefits and maybe some of the drawbacks or struggles with that?
Yeah. So with Monks, his is a little bit different too because he went and like raised a ton of capital, and I mean his is a true startup. Yeah, it's a true startup, and he's got all of his own employees as well, and I helped raise money for our app as well. But our agency is actually separate from the app, and so but Monks has done a lot of amazing things too. Like he's a huge role model for me.
I agree.
When it comes to just specifically for raising money and just going after something and doing the work, and that's what Monks does. And so I'm really proud of him for that. And he's seeing some really cool success. But yeah, specifically for me, like I got to the end of the strength conditioning career, and I was just like, man, I don't want to do this. Financially, it's not exactly what I would like it to be. And so I had a really good friend, a mentor of mine, who I was actually going to be investing with anyway. Completely liquidated everything that I had, moved back in with my parents, and we, as a collective, as a family, we decided to invest in this app that we launched, and we actually just launched in January. It's called Cube Money, QUBE Money, and it's eventually going to be a total mobile banking concept with budgeting attached to it and spending and investing, and like it'll be a whole mobile banking suite basically.
Your family launched this?
No. We just invested in it.
Okay.
I helped with certain parts of the branding and the launch and I've kind of been somewhat of a consultant from afar on the app as a whole, but my day-to-day is financial consulting, and so I mean, owning my own business or being a part owner of our agency, really three of us have built it, and it's good, it's one of those things that you're in your first. I'm really only in my first year and a half of it, a little bit over a year and a half now that I've like actually been making money. But yeah, there's certainly benefits to it. Like I obviously set my own schedule and I do kind of my own thing. But that can certainly be a drawback because it was for me early on. I think, just how the school system and how everything that we're taught from a young age is really meant to be somebody who clocks in, and like it doesn't necessarily, like, I'm not saying that that's wrong at all. It's that's how the vast majority of people do it. But for me, it's just like I was just kind of like over the mundane of things.
Oh, 100%.
And I guess I was just like willing to bet on myself that I could get it done. And there's been a lot of highs and there's been a lot of lows. Like, recently has been a low. And it hasn't been the best financially for me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm getting by. I'm doing fine. But, it's not what I want it to be. And it's not where I'm like, can be, somewhat careless with my money. I just need to watch my money a little bit more. And then there's times where it's just like, I'll go buy a $1,700 pair of, golf clubs, like whatever. And it's just like, it's fine, but to that point, there's sometimes in those early stages, you feel a level of like imposter syndrome, and it's totally natural. And it's just something that you have to work yourself through and convince yourself that, you know what you're talking about. And, but then also prove it to yourself by going and doing the work. And going and closing deals and going and getting new clients. And so it's a constant process of just being under construction as a whole, as a person, which I think, is just one of those life lessons as well, of like always be under construction, never, feel like you've made it or never feel you've, that you've arrived or anything like that. And so, but honestly, like it's, I can't really imagine it another way. I guess I just love anxiety. Like constant anxiety of whether or not I'm gonna have.
Dude, you'll have anxiety if you work a 9 to 5 and like if everything's Yeah, dude. I struggle with anxiety all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll have that even if you're not working for yourself.
Yeah. I guess like some of the holdup that I had for the longest time was the comparison game. You know, like I finished a master's degree late, and I got into the adult world later than most people because I was in school and I was doing internships, and that's what that strength conditioning world required. And so I was willing to go through it. And then you come to this realization that that's not really what you want anymore, and that's okay. And so it took me a long time to really understand that, like, hey, it's okay to. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're quitting. It just means that you're changing directions.
Right.
And for me, it's always been a battle of, like, I'm a pretty disciplined person, but sometimes to a fault, in the sense that, like, I overextend myself in a certain way, and then I'll go like a week and not want to do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and that's probably some of the anxiety that kicks in a little bit for me as a whole. Like I've never been diagnosed that I have anxiety disorder or whatever it may be. I don't even know.
Yeah, we don't go to the doctor.
Yeah, I really haven't been to the doctor.
I mean, neither.
Like
since
5,
we got
6 years.
physicals.
Yeah,
since
literally
we got our
since I got,
physicals in college.
Yeah, exactly. Like I haven't been to the doctor.
I got COVID tested once, and I was in a drive-through.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I should see a doctor. I don't know what they would tell me. They'd probably tell me I'm crazy, but like, as a whole, like, it's just something that you have to constantly, like, the most benefit that I've found from anything is consistently doing the work of whatever the project or the objective may be. Like, the really the end result is in the work. And like, it's the processes that you work yourself through constantly. And like, look, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm perfect at it all the time. Like, I still screw up all the time, and I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to figure my way. And but I think that's kind of the beauty of entrepreneurship, is that it's just like, it's a constantly ever evolving process. And if you feel like you're not under construction, that's when you need to, like, go attack something new. Like, you need to go figure something else out. I don't know, and maybe that's, like, not the right mindset to have, but for me, it's just always been like, once you feel like you're there, that's when you need to go look at doing something new, or you need to figure out something within your own system or your own process that needs to change. Because truly, I think the best people are just constantly under construction. Like, you're always having to figure new things out. You're always looking for new information. You're always, seeking fulfillment in some way, in some other way than what you've maybe currently had. And so, like, for me, yeah, it's been a crazy last 3 years of a lot of really tough nights, and a lot of really great nights, and a lot of, super early mornings, and a lot of, like, damn, I missed my alarm, but luckily I don't have to go to a boss, and so it's just like, the biggest thing is setting yourself up for success. I think is really important. Like, really deciding where you're wanting to go, and then setting up the steps to actually get there. And, like, again, like, I'm not perfect at this yet at all. Like, I'm still figuring it out. You could talk to anybody else, and they would maybe have a more concrete answer for you, but for me, like, I'm still a baby in this game, and I'm still trying to figure it out as much as I can. But I think that that's the beauty of it, and I think that probably the best entrepreneurs in the world would tell you that, even if there's someone that is really highly regarded, like a Grant Cardone or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or
Tony Robbins,
anybody is just like, the thing that they did best is they just kept evolving. And so that's what I hope to do and continue to do, is to just continue to evolve, continue to try and make myself better as best as I can, and work up from there. So I don't know, maybe that's maybe that's the wrong way of looking at it, but that's kind of how I see it, and hope to help people understand, is that, like, entrepreneurship doesn't mean that you can just, like, set your own hours and shit'll happen.
Right.
Like it's just not how that goes.
Not at all.
And being your own boss is oftentimes far more difficult than having a boss, even if your boss is a total ass. And so, yeah, man, it's been a process. I will tell you that, and it's been a scary process. And there's been really dark times, but there's also been some times that have been really, really cool. And I hope to have more of those, but I also hope to have some really tough times still. Like I really do hope to have some really difficult decisions to make.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yeah, and so for me it's just been it's just a constant learning curve. Like I feel like every week I learn something new, or I something tries to pull me from my focus, and I'm getting better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's all just it's a constant construction project for sure.
Well, yeah, and something that you kind of touched on is you said that you failed, you done this, you done that, like professionally for me, if somebody whenever I go for interviews or things like that, I'll be like, yeah, I'm the pull the trigger guy. I mean, maybe that's not the best thing to say nowadays. Maybe I'm like the go getter guy who's you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I don't know, I'm fine. If it's time to jump out of the airplane, I'll be like, yep. You know what I mean? Or if it's time to send this email that's it might be good, it might be bad, I'd be like, bam.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's my kind of thing, and that's what I tell people. And even if it's good or bad, if it's failing or it might push you right in the right direction, just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not afraid to fail.
Yeah.
How many games we lost, how many wrestling matches, how many fights I've lost. Yeah, things like that. You know what I mean? You just got to get in there.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get in the game, and that's one of the biggest things too. Is so many people have really good ideas, and they're at the same time too, I can empathize with them if they're coming from a position of hey, I've got 3 kids and I've got a wife, I just gotta make this happen,
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's also a time where you have to say, okay, well now I gotta go get it,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't come from a place of knowing what it's like to have a wife and kids. I would assume it's far more stressful.
For sure.
For all the right reasons and all the best
yeah.
reasons, right?
Yeah.
All the best reasons possible. But yeah, for me, really I looked at it as hey, I've got a pretty killer resume. I've worked with, all pro NFL players and NBA players, and I've also worked with some of the best D1 programs in the country. When I was thinking about it, making the transition to something totally new, I was coming from it in a place of well, if I screw up, I can go do this. And, for me, the biggest growth that I had was when I decided that it wasn't an option anymore, that I could go back to that. This was what the new thing was for me. And and to really attack it. And also enjoy it. I found joy in it too. And, you close your first, I closed a $30,000 deal, and I was like, holy shit. I've never had $30,000 in my bank account. But the flip side of that too was I spent that shit really fast. I spent it like I had $300,000 in my bank account. And so that was also a learning curve. And so I continue to go back to the career capital thing, but that was another career capital thing of hey, you work as a business owner, you only get paid when you work and deliver. And that I was just I fell into a deal that ended up being a $30,000 deal, and it was okay, that's not gonna happen all the time. You're gonna have $200 deals, you're gonna have $500 deals, you're gonna have $1,000 deals, you're gonna have $15,000 deals. That'll be great too,
Oh yeah.
But to expect that you're just gonna constantly turn out those deals, specifically when you're early on in your career and you haven't really figured out the verbiage or figured out, the way people interact. And, one of the things that I would honestly recommend to every entrepreneur is study human psychology. Study how people react to certain things and different personalities, and how, people from different areas will react to how you talk. I screwed up a deal because I was like taking coronavirus lightly, and it was someone who was like a doctor in an area that was highly infected in Seattle, and I lost the deal because I was taking it lightly and kind of like making fun of it. Not necessarily making fun of it, but just being like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. And she was like, yeah, it's really not though, and you're an ass. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fair. Like at the time, I was like, damn it. I was like, screw you then, I don't care. And it was like, well, that was like a $25,000 deal, and you just screwed it up because of your own ego. And so, so learning how to be a master of like communication and people is super important as an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah.
Well, learning how to sell too is big, but like that's probably the number one thing is learning how to sell. But learning how to sell comes from understanding communication and understanding the right things to say. And even when you don't say the right thing, learning how to recover from that and like being able to set your ego aside and be like, hey, like I'm an idiot, like I'm sorry.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like having empathy, you know, having all of those different things, like it's all part of the process. But you know, again, it's one of those things where I'm thankful for every experience, and even when it's bad, even when it's really hard. You know, maybe not at the time because my anxiety will kick in and be really scared. But you know, I look back from it, you know, 2 months later, and I'm like, damn, like that was. I'm storing that. You know what I mean? Like I'm keeping that in my mind for next time. So you just learn.
Win or learn.
Yep.
One thing you were talking about, you touched on anxiety, and then you were saying psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a thing about maybe overthinking what people think, or you know what I mean, or their reactions on not social media, but maybe even over email or text or something like that? Like, is there I don't know. How do you deal with that? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So, like,
do you use psychology for that, or because I think if you're using psychology for that, you could be totally wrong.
Yeah, that's true. I would say, man, I would honestly say, like, we, you know, specifically our generation has been so, you know, taught and it's ingrained in our heads that, like, texting is the best form of communication, when in reality it's, like, the worst form of communication possible.
Like, a lot of times I prefer not to talk on the phone to people.
Yeah.
But I would rather talk to them in person or text.
100%.
Or email or whatever.
Yeah. But, like, emailing is just, like, the 1980s version or 1990s version of texting.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Everything can be lost in context because there's no, like, actual personal interaction or inflection in somebody's voice. And so, you know, when it comes to communication in general, obviously it's best to do it in person. You know, there's most of my stuff, I have clients in, like, 25 states. And so all of my stuff is Zoom, which is great. Like, I really enjoy that. It's really time efficient. But also, like, I'm talking to them face to face. Like, in general, right? Like, I'm talking to them face to face. They can hear me. They can see my reactions. They can see me smiling. They can see me frowning. Whatever. But yeah, like.
Yeah, that is a bit better.
Yeah, and so, in general, like, I try to avoid long form communication through text, specifically with clients. Even more so if I'm like really serious about dating somebody, like. And I want to show like actual interest. But you know, everything in general is just better when you're talking to someone face to face.
Oh yeah.
And it also helps you like put your ego aside of like, hey, the only way that I can really tell you how I'm feeling is through text or an Instagram DM or Facebook or whatever. Like, that's not the case. And I think the reason that and this is maybe just like a pat on my own back, but like the reason that people like to do business with me is I'm like the same person in text, in email, in Facebook, in Instagram, in person, on the phone. If I'm doing a video, like I'm just me. And maybe that's like a lesson in personal branding or just like I'm just me. Now I'll tone it back if I have somebody that like is offended by a curse word. Like I'm not gonna say like, fuck yeah, today was great. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna tone it back, but that's just a level of professionalism. And but at the end of the day, like I'm just gonna be me. And truth be told, like people who like can't accept like who I am, that's okay. And I really don't want your business anyway. Like that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just gonna be me. And I let F words slip every now and then. And if it's somebody that is, offended by it, then I'll apologize to them and they'll know that it's genuine. I'm just like, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. You know what I mean? And they'll be like, yeah, it's fine. Like, no big deal. Like, most people are understanding of it.
Yeah.
And if they're going to make a huge deal about it, then that's okay. You probably don't want them if they're going to get mad over a 4-letter word, if used in the context that's not offensive to them,
Right.
then they're probably someone that's going to like riff over something small between your guys' business contract or whatever you sold them or whatever. They're probably someone that's going to look for issues as a whole. And so, like, for me, I just, I try to be myself always. And, if somebody doesn't like that, then that's okay. They can kind of they can go to the next person, because there's not only one of me. Like, there's many of me, I'm sure, out there. And, that sell a similar thing or preach a similar thing. I think I do it better, obviously. Maybe that's my confidence in what I preach with people, and that's my belief in what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's another lesson, right? Like, that just grows with you as you grow into it. Like, I'm way different now than I was, 2 years ago when I started. And so, yeah, I think people just, you just learn, right? Like, I've had bad interactions with people. I've had great interactions with people. I've had great interactions that didn't end up in business, but maybe, I had a client come back to me, somebody that I talked to early on in my career, and they came back to me a few weeks ago and were like, hey, I'm ready to do business. And it was like, they remembered me as somebody who maybe wasn't ready, but maybe their confidence is in me now. Who's to say? It's not your decision to decide why they wanted to do it with you. But from there, you got to deliver and just continue to be yourself. And that's why it's even more important to continue to just always be under construction, like, as a person in general, not just in your field, not just physically, not just mentally, but holistically. Continue to be under construction and just get better as a person, and everything else falls into place.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I feel like I was like an idiot like a month ago. You know what I mean? Like, just compared to like what we do. And one thing, all right, so what can you explain more of what you do and your app and all that, and we can close it down?
Yeah, for sure. So I say I'm a financial consultant because whenever you think financial advisor, you instantly think market. And I'm not anti-market. I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm more so I like to call myself like the McDonald's of finance, in the sense that
got everything.
It's
I love McDonald's, by the way.
You can really get a really good I guess, like, view of what you want in a number of different ways. Like, if you want chicken nuggets, great. If you want a burger, awesome. Oh, you want ice cream, cool. We've got that sometimes.
If it's not broken.
Yeah, if it's not broken. I shouldn't say that, right?
If you want a salad.
If you want a salad, whatever. But I say consultant because I come from it as a holistic point of view, and I use the analogy of what I call the financial house, which is, I shouldn't say just myself and my team. We came up with that together as a collective, and so I don't want to take like sole ownership of that, but we look at basically how we would construct our finances as how we would construct a house, and then we put it into a systemized process of this is what you do first, this is what you do second, this is what you do third, this is what you do fourth. And the beauty of it is, it doesn't matter if I'm working with a 7-figure client or if I'm working with a barely over 5-figure client. Like, I can work with anybody. Whereas, a lot of the time, like, if you're talking to a financial advisor, you have to have X amount of assets, or kind of the golden rule is, most people say, like, oh, you need $25,000 worth of investable assets until you can start investing. I want it to be a little bit more inclusive in the sense that I can work with anybody.
Yeah.
And so, and usually, honestly, what I've found is that most people are doing almost everything right. It's just maybe like one or two things. I go back to like the example of like a car. Like, if we've got like a regular nice car, if we were to like, maybe tint the windows and put new wheels on it, like, it'd look pretty cool, right? And so, similar thing with finance, like, most people are doing pretty much everything correctly. It's just like one or two things, however big or small, that can totally change everything for them. And so, so I look at everything. I look at debt. I look at assets. I look at cash flow. I look at liabilities. I look at their protection, everything. And then from there, we get a little bit more minute with our approach of like, how are you spending your money, and that's really where the app comes in. The app right now, and it's most.
What's the app called again?
Yeah, Cube Money, QUBE. And it follows the similar path of cash envelopes, which was coined by Dave Ramsey, but it's meant for this generation. It's not physical cash; it's actually digital, and so just like any other banking app, but you essentially have we actually coined and we have truly the safest card in the world. And the reason that we have the safest card in the world is that it's 100%. It's completely free of money. So there's no balance on it at any time. You actually have to decide if you're going to transfer money from a specific category within your budget. So that's the basic version of it right now. And then you spend, and then it balances back to whatever you have left in your budget in that particular category. Say it's $300 in groceries per month, and you spend $100. Now it bounces back to $200 for the rest of the month. And then it wipes it clean at the end of each month and puts it towards savings or debt or whatever you want. And so that's like our basic version right now. We did launch, but we're technically still kind of in a beta phase. We just passed a milestone last week. We've got about a little bit over $2 million inside the app, which is pretty cool. And people are using it every single day. We raised a little bit over $6 million for the app as a whole, which was a whole 2.5-3 year long process, and so
no kidding.
Yeah, so we're finally to a point where we're out in the world and we're going to start working towards our Series A. But yeah, as a whole, like I just want to I'm writing the book, and it's specifically going to be I was wanting to do it specifically for young men, and I think it might still specifically be for young men, but I don't want to close it off to the ladies either. I'm coming from a place of like being a young man, like I can really relate to the struggles that you go through. I have no clue what a young female goes
I got
through.
nothing.
And so, I can't necessarily relate to that, but money principles are very much the same as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my systems aren't necessarily just for men. Like they're clearly for families, businesses, men, women, single, divorced, whatever the case may be. And so, but the book I think will be a really cool way for people who are like just starting out. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they're between, because I feel like the really fragile age of specifically understanding money and where you're going with it is those ages between like 18 and 35 are super, super important, because some people are still figuring it out. And the amount of people that I've talked to who are in their 40s and 50s and 60s who never figured it out and are out of time, frankly.
They're going to have to work forever.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Exactly. And so, hopefully to, I was having the hardest time starting writing the book. And I've always been a great writer. Like I got like a 34 on the ACT in English. Like that was my bet, but I got like an 18 on everything else. So it was not to go back to the, education side of things, because that might be a broken thing. But I've always been a good writer. I've always enjoyed it. I've never felt like I was ever in a bad place when I was writing. I always felt happy writing. And so that's why I wanted to write the book. But I stewed over it for 3, 4, 5 months of like, how do I start?
Yeah.
And I didn't really know how to start. And so what I did probably a month ago was I sat down and I wrote my mission statement. And I was like, what do you want this book to do? What do you want it to actually do? And I would actually say that this is probably one of the most important parts of like starting a business too. Any endeavor that you're wanting to go through, like any type of goal that you have, like sitting down and figuring out like, what do you want to happen? What do you want? Like, what's the ideal world or end goal of what you're wanting to accomplish here, and write that down. And so I wrote it down, and it was something along the lines of, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it was like, I want to empower young people to take control of their finances, to set themselves up for a better future, to have active cash flow rather than quote unquote locked up cash flow, which is what the vast majority of the financial world is, and totally change the rhetoric behind, like, you have to go get a job, fund a 401k, you know, pay as minimum amount as you can on insurance because it's a fraud, which it's not, like, and just, like, kind of debunk everything, and basically put people in the driver's seat financially to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I wrote that down, and then words just started coming, right? And, like, the system of, you know, this is what chapter 1 is, this is what chapter 2 is, like, everything started just flowing. And so that's you know, that's kind of, I guess, as a whole what I'm doing. But in general, yeah, man, like, finance has become, like, a total passion of mine. Like, I love talking about money. I love talking startups. I love talking business finance. Like, I work with every single person that you can think of, black, white, Asian, you know, foreign as a whole, like, completely new to this country, you know, 18, 30, 50, 60, just closed a deal on a couple that's 72, you know what I mean? Like, and it can totally change. It might not change their life today, but it's going to change, like, their big deal is legacy, you know what I mean? And so, like, we're changing that, you know what I mean? And so, so it's been pretty cool. Like, I get to talk to people all over the country with different backgrounds, with different points of view, and just continue to refine my craft and go from there.
So, feel free to say whatever. We can do whatever with the video and all that. So let's say I get $1 million today. Do I pay off my house and pay off my car?
I think it depends. I think it's funny. I've got a guy that I did a podcast with. We're thinking about starting our own podcast.
You guys should.
Yeah. He's awesome at it. He's so good. But Kyle Sheehan, man, he's a guy that I met in the strength conditioning world. So, career capital, right?
Of course.
And
networking.
Yeah, networking
all that.
and learning all that stuff. But he's somebody that I met, professional in every sense of the word. And but him and I are thinking about writing a book together called The Money Languages. Very similar to love languages, right? I always thought that was kind of like the zodiac signs of, like, whatever, like
crystals.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
all that. Yeah.
So, but the more I've worked with people, the more I've realized that, you know, there's people that are, like, their money language is spending money, you know, or the next person's, you know, money language is, you know, saving money, or the next person's money language is investing money, or the next person's love language is getting rid of debt. You know, like, I'm personally, like, my personal opinion, my professional opinion is if you don't have debt that's over 5%, like, if you've got, even if you have a ton of debt that's over 5%, if it's not killing your cash flow, you're probably okay. I wouldn't necessarily worry about it, right? But there's also people that are like, we want to be debt free, like,
that's
tomorrow.
Number one priority.
Right. And so that their money language would be to get rid of debt faster. And that's okay. Like, and so for me, then I have to figure out how do we get them to that point. But if you have $1 million tomorrow, like, for me, like, if I'm talking about my current situation, which my debt is not that bad. Like,
if you were me, and let's say I don't have a ton of debt besides my house and car.
Right, yeah, I would go in real estate, multifamily, tomorrow.
And not pay off what I have.
No.
Just go ahead and multifamily, like, get another house, get a apartment or something and rent it out.
Yeah, I
Maybe
would
get another house and rent this one out or something like that.
Yeah, or I would sell this. And I would go and buy an 8-plex, a 4-plex, you know, somewhere where you can find a deal, live in one part of it. That way you're living rent free. You're building equity. You're building wealth. You're also getting cash flow on top of it, active cash flow that you can use. Mm-hmm. Where, I mean, shit, if you were in an 8-plex, I don't know what income you're bringing in each month, but for a lot of people, for the average American, if they had an 8-plex that was cash flowing, they probably wouldn't have to work. You know, they'd probably be bringing in around $4,000 a month, and
that would do fine.
Yeah,
that would do fine.
Depending on your location, right? Like, the market is important, as far as the housing market, the demographic, the economics of the city that you're living in is obviously really important. Mm-hmm. But for me, you know, and honestly, I wouldn't even sell this place. Like, I would probably keep this place. You're right by a college. I would rent it out. You know, I would rent it out, make sure it's covering the mortgage plus some, and make sure it's cash flowing, and you're in a totally different situation. And so,
What
you know,
about with the cars?
yeah, with
Is that a thing, or
yeah, with cars,
does that even matter?
Obviously, you need a sense of transportation, but I'm a huge fan of not having to have such a massive car note. Now, I'm a bit of a hypocrite in that sense. Like, full transparency, I don't really have any credit. And so, for me, like, I needed to go build some credit, so I did go buy a car.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got, like, a little spending credit card, to build some credit. But my interest rate right now is at like 12% on my car because I just didn't have any credit at all. And so I'm refinancing next month, so it'll be fine it'll be like, back down to like 3.5. But, but it's one of those things where it's like, damn, like I should have gotten like not as nice of a car, but it's all hearsay in a sense where it's like, damn, like I wish I could have done this or that. But, everybody needs a car to get around in, but if you can buy it if you can buy it in cash, or if you can, get a very low monthly payment on it, then do what you got to do. But I'm not a huge fan in like purchasing cars simply because it's not an appreciating asset in any way, shape, or form. Like you take it off the lot,
it's only depreciates.
It only depreciates.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But specifically with real estate and why I'm such a fan of it is, and this would be maybe something for people who maybe haven't bought a house yet. The best way to do this, and we haven't been taught this, but, the best way to do it is if you're going to use that FHA loan, like your first time home buyer's loan, at 3.5%.
You don't always get it either.
You don't.
You don't.
But if you qualify for it, do not buy a single door. Go buy a fourplex, a duplex, and you'll end up spending less because that's a property that once you eventually understand real estate, that's a property that you'll want to go rent out or flip or whatever, and you'll end up having to put 20% down rather than 3.5%. So what you can do is say, go get that duplex or fourplex or whatever at 3.5% down, use that as your FHA loan, and then basically live rent free for 2 years, then go put 20% down on a single family home that you maybe want to buy and have as your primary residence, and keep that other property as a cash flowing property. You're still probably living rent free. And so it's just a monthly. Everybody looks at, what do I need yearly to be able to survive, but what people really need to do is switch their mindset to what do I need monthly to get, to do what I want to do, to be able to invest, to be able to, afford my car payment, afford my mortgage, afford, being able to take the lady out for a date at, twice a month. And so, it's a bit of a mindset shift in a sense, but it needs to come from a monthly aspect rather than a yearly aspect. And then additionally, that's kind of just a small tidbit is, if you're a first-time home buyer, man, like, and everybody does this, so it's not like anybody's fault. They just haven't been taught, right? Like, hey, this is what you should do, or this is maybe it's just a little bit of a different mindset shift of like, hey, I would rather put 3.5% down on a $400,000, fourplex, and I can live in one unit and live rent free, and it's still cash flowing at say $1,600 a month. And then I can use the 20%. Like, I'll take all of the profits from that, all of the tax advantages from that, and I'll take the profits from that and save that up for my, my single door, primary residence here 2 years later. Mm-hmm. Plus, you can refinance that fourplex and go do the same thing to another property, or take the cash out refinance and go buy a single family unit. You can have that set up, and so. Again, it's just about understanding numbers, figuring out, what that all looks like, and truly running the numbers and just being honest with yourself. Yeah. That would be the number one thing I would say. Just like with our diet, right? Like, we need to know how many calories we're eating if we want to lose weight. You need to understand that with your budget, with your money in general, like, you have to come from a place of being totally honest with yourself and really understanding where you're actually at to get to where you want to go. So.
Yeah. That sounds great, and definitely thanks a lot for meeting with me, and we'll have to do it again sometime. And I would love to come on to you all's podcast if you get one going. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm decent with my money, and got a lot of hands in a lot of pots. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it should be all good. Well, thanks a lot,
Yeah,
Grant.
thanks so much for having me, brother.
Thank you.